Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In today's special episode, we sat down with Ross Kennedy, founder of a U.S.-based logistics and supply chain advisory, Fortis Analysis, and senior fellow at Security Studies Group. He sheds light on why China is buying up our farmland. Zooming in on the Chinese corn mill project in North Dakota, the Fufeng Group, and how a federal agency just ruled it has no jurisdiction over that purchase. Let's zoom in. Ross, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate you having me.
So let's start with the controversy around the Fufeng Group, the wet corn milling farm in North Dakota that's close to the Grand Forks Air Force Base. We've covered that for months, and it seems now this federal agency decided that CFIUS does not have jurisdiction to stop this, and so Fufeng Group is allowed to go ahead. What do you see about this? Why is this so significant?
Well, there's like a lot of things that have been tied up with this case. This is either a case of firsts, or at least firsts where some of the details and some of the behaviors and all of that are available for analysis in a public way. CFIUS, by and large, is a very confidential process. It is a national security review at its heart. So what has become known publicly has almost invariably been because Fufeng or their collaborators, the city of Grand Forks, have decided to go to the media with information, share very specific details. And so we know a lot more about this simply because they're more willing to talk freely and publicly in some ways. In a lot of ways, it seems to be CCC, we're not guilty, we're talking about these things. But at the same time, typically, details of CFIUS transactions aren't available publicly because it is supposed to be a confidential process. But being voluntary, people can talk out of school and sometimes choose to do so. So from that, we have more details available to analyze. So it's difficult to say, well, this case versus another case. What we can say here is a few things. Based on the public record of what's been known, this was what's called a covered transaction versus a covered real estate transaction. So what CFIUS was trying to determine is, do they, based on the facts of the case, do they have the jurisdiction to formally review, investigate, and issue a ruling on this from a national security standpoint, this specific transaction that was under review, which was the purchase of 370 acres of farmland about 12 to 13 miles from Grand Forks Air Force Base for the purpose of building a wet corn mill. The explicit covered piece of that CFIUS was trying to determine, do they have the jurisdiction to make a ruling on it or not, to take control in some way of the circumstances of that transaction and make it right from a national security side. The only piece of that they really could look at was the actual purchase of the farmland itself. Did it or did it not meet certain requirements and thresholds? Ultimately, CFIUS held that farmland is not a covered asset class where it is covered as an asset of an American company, and on that merit alone be able to be brought in for review as a transaction or a covered transaction by CFIUS. So they didn't say, we've looked at the data, everything's good, there's no risk with Fufeng, the deal may go forward. All they said was CFIUS, under the law, FIRMA, that CFIUS operates under with its authorities, does not have the authority to pull this in and make a national security review recommendation on that. That does activate and open up other agencies, other entities, other authorities within the U.S. government, some within Congress, some within the executive branch, to now begin to take a look at the details of the transaction and make a more immediate assessment of it. Is it a national security threat or not? And if so, what can be done about this? The main point here, and this is very important as relates to what are the lessons we can draw for other cases in the future, is that the city of Grand Forks very transparently and very openly did everything they could within their legal authorities to pave the way for this transaction forward, both at the state level and at a federal level. When you look at the timing of rezoning, you look at the timing of purchases of the land, you look at the timing of a lot of these things, there was a number of thresholds that had to be cleared from a legality standpoint and a regulatory standpoint to get us here. And so to structure the deal in such a way that it avoided CFIUS oversight and that it did not run afoul of North Dakota Century Code's rules on foreign ownership of land in the state, They threaded a very narrow, deliberate path here to make sure this transaction happened the way it did without the ability of CFIUS to pull it in for review. So we will likely see a pattern of behavior similar to this by Chinese companies working with cities hand in glove to construct transactions in such a way that it really minimizes the chances for CFIUS to step in and take a jurisdictional approach to this and say, hey, we need to review this. This is not right. The other key thing you look at here, this transaction was announced that land was going to be bought in November of 2021. The land finally was sold in April of 2022. April 28th was when the land deeds were transferred. That's 6 months of constructive notice where CFIUS agencies had the ability to review this, pull it in, stop the transaction, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, intervene in the process to stop it and conduct a review. They waited until after the fact, till the land was already sold, and then kind of said, well, the sale happened, the land is done, it's already moved on, we don't have jurisdiction now. There was a lot of misses here, deliberately so, I think, on the part of some of the CFIUS agencies to not have to review this and then be able to kind of throw their hands up and say, well, we did what we could. Well, they didn't truly do what they could. They knew about the transaction months in advance, and really, with the exception of maybe one or two agencies involved in the process, didn't really seem to show interest in this until July, when it became a enormous kind of storm in the media over the 4th of July weekend, starting with the CNBC report, layered on top of all of the early reporting that was done by Epoch Times, NTD, some of the other entities who were first to this story, Beck TV in North Dakota, who understood the risks, tried to warn about it. Eventually, their hand was forced at CFIUS, but it was months too late to really do anything about it.
And Ross, it almost sounds like there's, a lot of corruption on our side. It seems, a lot of legislations are saying all the blame is the Chinese Communist Party. But what does this show in terms of our own legal system?
Well, it's one of these things where when you look at when the horse gets out of the barn, do you blame the horse for doing what the horse is going to do and try to escape? Or do you blame the person who forgot to lock the door to the barn? And in my view, by and large, an adversary of the US, it doesn't matter if it's Iran, it doesn't matter if it's North Korea, Russia, China, or anybody else, you can anticipate and expect that they are going to exploit every loophole. They're going to exploit every means within their arsenal of tactics and tricks and strategies to undermine the national security of the United States. Is that acceptable? No, it's not acceptable. It cannot be, but it's not unexpected either. And so when we allow our own people, our own officials at the political level, whether it's at the city level, county level, state, or federal level, to help the adversary circumvent national security protocols, those are honestly the individuals and entities and organizations that I have a bigger concern about. I'm madder about this in terms of wanting to maybe try to find someone to blame. I'm madder about CFIUS not doing its job. I'm madder about the city of Grand Forks, the administration, doing everything it could to circumvent this. I'm mad at the state of North Dakota for bringing this deal to the city of Grand Forks, pushing for it to be in Grand Forks, and now throwing their hands up and saying, well, this is the city's responsibility, not ours. When I look at the chain of custody of who could have done what, who actively worked against the interests of the US to make this deal try to come to fruition, I'm much more upset with them than I am at Fufeng or at the People's Republic of China. Frankly, I expect that from them. We must expect better and hold our own accountable for creating these opportunities for the enemy to do their work inside the United States.
And it does seem, as you mentioned, all the media reporting of this, that there is a growing awareness of, say, foreign entities, whether that's China or Russia potentially buying our land. There are certain states taking action against that, but it almost sounds like it's more the root issue of profit, like who in the chain of command is kind of breaking away for their own profit. So how do we really defend against that then?
Well, number one is that whenever these Chinese companies come to the United States with the promises of economic development, they're exploiting gaps in our own industrial manufacturing and infrastructure base. So in the case of the Texas wind farms, it was that part of Texas can be pretty deficit of energy at certain times of year. and the tax credit structure for wind farms, the need for additional energy in that part of the state of Texas, all of that was exploited to say, well, you really need these wind farms. We'll buy this land, we'll take on the burden of building it, we'll put energy back into the grid. If Texas had been doing its job on managing its energy grid better, there wouldn't have been an opportunity for someone to come in from the outside and say, hey, we've got the ability to fix this problem for you. It's the same with the corn milling. They were going to come in and make, Fufeng wants to come in and make human food grade ingredients, things like monosodium glutamate, maybe xanthan gum, or animal feed ingredients, things like threonine, lysine, valine, tryptophan, amino acids that go into the animal feed process. If we had an abundance of that manufacturing capacity managed by domestic entities, there would be no opportunity for an outsider to come in and say, we promise hundreds of millions of dollars in economic development and an ongoing, robust jobs base if the market's already full up of those types of products. By allowing our manufacturing base to degrade, we are allowing opportunities for the entity to come in and gain a foothold on the basis of promising things that we do need because we haven't taken care of our own needs ourselves. And that's where the states have begun stepping in. That's where Florida and Texas had to step in because of that big giant wind farm deal near Laughlin Air Force Base in southern Texas. Florida has stepped in. Ron DeSantis is doing what he can as a governor to lead on this issue. In my view, particularly states that host military bases and military infrastructure, those states in particular have an enormous responsibility to lead on this issue. We do have other opportunities at the non-state level. Things like the Farm Bill is coming up for 2024. We could put provisions into the Farm Bill about foreign ownership of land or land that has been received payments from the U.S. government in the last 10 years, not being able to be purchased by foreign entities for at least 5 years after receipt of government payments. Things like that need to be thought of and implemented at the state and federal level so that we don't have opportunities for entities to come in and exploit. It's a multi-tiered approach. It takes a lot of collaboration and cooperation, but it is good in the case of Texas. It is good in the case of Florida. Recognition by both North Dakota and South Dakota, Florida on the issue of TikTok on company phones. Those types of things are welcome steps in the right direction, very encouraging signals, and that's momentum that we can't let go of. If anything, we really need to accelerate that type of thinking and public awareness.
That was Ross Kennedy, founder of U.S.-based logistics and supply chain advisory Fortis Analysis and senior fellow at the Security and Studies Group. And for those watching our full episode, after a break, we hear more from him on what the Chinese regime's endgame is here in buying up farmland in the U.S. and what steps concerned citizens can take. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you soon.